Today we're talking about wood stoves.
So we've been on different forums and things over the years, and people talk about wood stoves, and they always seem to have questions about wood stoves. Well, we heat our home with wood stove. We actually have 3 wood stoves, 2 in the house and 1 in my studio. But here, we're going to talk about 2 different kinds of wood stoves today that we have in our house. Okay, so today the wood stoves are not on, so it's a good day to talk about them. So in our kitchen, we have a cook stove. And I see on the internet, it depends on where you live, but there's all kinds of people, they say things like if they're going to get a wood stove, they want to get a cook stove, and they're going to heat their whole house with it. And if the power goes out or something or whatever, they can't get gas anymore or whatever, they're going to cook their food on it and heat their whole house. Well, it depends on where you live. That might be possible. And depending on where you live, that's not going to be possible, and I'll tell you why. That was a plan that we had originally, and then we learned that there are differences in wood stoves. There are heat stoves, and there are cook stoves. And that might sound funny at first, but the difference is a cook stove is intentionally made to heat up and cook your food. It's not made to cook or to heat the whole house. It's made to simply cook your food and attempt to be efficient about that. Now, if you have a small place or if you live in a warmer place, we're in Ohio, and I'll tell you there is no way that this stove could heat our entire house. It's just not possible. But if I had 1,000 square feet or less, I would think that this would probably do it, actually. But if you have more than 1,000 square feet, and you're in Ohio or north of that, this stove will not cut it. Now, this is a very good quality cook stove. This is a Stanley, and it's imported from Ireland, and it's a very good cook stove. Now, why do we have this? There's all kinds of others on the market. There's Pioneer Maid, Pioneer Queen, and all those different ones. Those are good stoves too, but they are not airtight stoves. That is one thing that's very important. If you're going to get any kind of wood stove, it's got to be an airtight stove, or your insurance, your homeowner's insurance, will most likely not cover it. And if you install a stove without notifying your insurance company and they find out you have it, or something happens and the house burns down, they might not cover the damages. So this cook stove is actually an EPA airtight stove. That's why we have it, because it's all good with the insurance. So a little bit about the cook stove. Firebox is here. This is where you would load your wood when the fire's going. If you're starting a fire and the fire's not going yet, you could put it in here. Since we have the firebox open, I want to point out the main difference between a cook stove and a heat stove is the size of the firebox. Firebox is about 15 inches deep, but they suggest that you only put in 14-inch material. 9 inches wide, 10 inches high. That's not a lot of wood, and that's not going to heat a house overnight. It's, once again, not made for heating a house. It's made for cooking on. In the way that these work, there is a damper here. You put it one way and all the heat can, all the smoke goes up the chimney. You put it the other way, it closes that off and forces the smoke to go across the top of the oven down here, down the side, and then out the back, which would warm the oven. And we've cooked in this oven before. Do you like to bake in this oven?
Not really.
How is it to bake in this oven?
Harder.
It's harder.
Because you have to keep the heat the same in the oven that you need it.
It's more difficult to keep a consistent heat. You have to constantly be watching it. You don't want your coals to go out. You got to have a right amount of wood in there, and it takes longer, doesn't it? It takes longer to cook on it.
Mm-hmm.
That's in the oven. Stovetop, though, how's the stovetop? Stovetop is not any slower than anything else, is it?
No.
Actually, it might be faster. Your heat tends to be, your firebox is here. This side gets piping hot. This side over here is cooler. It's definitely not cool, but it's cooler than it is over here. So if you were cooking something in this pan, you need it to heat up good. You have it over here. If you need to control your heat, turn your heat down, you really can't do that except by sliding it to the other side where it's cooler. And kind of adjusting your heat by adjusting how close you are to the firebox. So your firebox on these is right here, and this is a clean out. And what's really nice about these, it has a grate inside, and as your things turn to coals, the ash falls down, and of course falls right into this little drawer which has an open end, and we can dump it gently into a metal bucket to dispose of it. Okay, this might be hard to film. It's a black stove, but yeah, this is the firebox, and I'm not sure how well you're going to see. This is the clean out for the firebox, and of course this is the oven. Hard to see in there, but the firebox is actually quite small on a cook stove. And the oven is not very big. It's not huge. It can't be. An up close view of the top of the stove, that is a door to the firebox that opens, and every one of these round access doors are removable. They are not burners, they are just access doors. So we live in Ohio in Amish country, and these kind of stoves are readily available, and so are the Pioneer stoves and other stoves as well. We know lots of people who have them, and this stove, the Stanley, is considered to be the best stove for cooking. The other stoves, the Pioneer stoves, people like them too. I know people that have them, and they have attempted to heat their home with it, and they always end up adding a heat stove, because even though they're a bigger stove than this is, they're still not designed for heating necessarily. They're designed for cooking, and some of those non-airtight stoves are not they're not airtight, and so you will use a lot more wood in those than you would in an airtight stove like this one. We've cooked all kinds of things on this stove.
Eggs, brownies.
Breakfast items normally. Brownies, cakes.
Bread maybe?
Bread, apple crisp. It's not something that we use all the time. In the wintertime, it's possible to be going, and if it's going, we tend to cook on it because it's hot. So what is this little bit of tile on the wall? What's that for? Well, you need a heat shield. This stove, it can be 12 inches from the wall. We're a little bit more than that, but that's how close it can be. But at the same time, it gets the drywall fairly warm. Not exceptionally hot, but hot enough that I felt I'd like to put up a little bit of a heat shield, and that's what these tiles are. They are providing a heat shield, and there's a little bit of space behind them. So they're taking the heat and not the wall.
This is the warming box. You can put pies or cakes or anything that needs to be warm, kept warm in here. Chimney passes through right here.
Right now we have the stove tools in it. Yeah, like she said, the chimney passes up through here, and so this thing gets warm, fairly warm. So any pies or whatever, yeah. As you cook food, throw it in there, keep it warm while you're cooking more stuff. So, as I said, we had 2 stoves in this house. the cook stove, which we just showed you, and the heat stove. This is the stove that we basically heat the house with. So one of the main differences about the stove versus the other one, this has a huge firebox. And when I say huge, compared to the other one, it's about 22 inches deep, 18 inches wide. I'm measuring 11 inches in height, but it's got a lot of ash in it. There might be an inch of ash, so let's say 12 inches in height. One thing I really like about this stove, there's a little trap door here. You can scrape all your ash into there and open the trap door while you're doing it. And there's a drawer underneath, and all that ash drops neatly into a drawer. And of course, it has a flip up back, and you can take that outside and dump it wherever. It's not going to catch something on fire. A lot of times wood ash is still hot. A little difficult to see into the firebox, but compared to the other one, it is huge. It's a very nice stove. It's efficient. Of course, it is an airtight stove as well. EPA, airtight stove, whatever. And so insurance companies like that. Okay, so this stove, as I said, is an airtight heat stove. And the manufacturer of this one is called Napoleon, and that is a Canadian company. And basically the firebox is in here, and then there's the shielding over it. So, you know, the shielding does get hot, but there's these little vents through there. And like there's one on top and it comes off. Well, there's little vents here in the front as well. One of the nice features about it, you can get a fan option. So the fan option basically is a little electric fan that can run in the back, and it's basically just blows air up into the between the jacket and the firebox, and it just helps move the air and blow the heat out. It actually distributes it pretty well. We don't use it that often, but when we do, it's nice because it does move the air and you get a little bit more of an even heat. One thing that people often don't think about is ceiling fans. A ceiling fan is really nice if you have a wood stove. Ceiling fans, you can run them in reverse, and the heat as it rises, you know, it helps bring that heat back down. Now, of course, it's not a necessity, but if you have a wood stove and you don't have fans anywhere, then you'll know what I'm talking about. The stove with the room can get extremely hot and almost be uncomfortable to be in, where the other rooms of the house can be very cold. So ceiling fans help with that, help circulate the air and move the air around. Another thing that helps is having a air return close to the stove. So I made sure that we had an air return duct close to our stove, because even if we're not running the furnace, we can put the fan mode on the furnace, and that can draw the heat into the ductwork and distribute it throughout the house as well. So there's a couple of options if we want to run fans. Another feature that I've designed into our home that you might want to consider if you're going to have a wood stove: when you're taking firewood in and out of the house, you let a lot of cold air in, let a lot of heat out. There's also a lot of wood trash that falls off of the firewood as you're shifting it. So something that I came up with is this cabinet, and we can fill the cabinet from the outside. I have a little door you can open up, and on the inside we can open it this way. So we fill it from outside. A lot of the wood trash falls off out there. Some of it falls off inside the cabinet. By the time the wood's in here, a lot of that stuff's fallen off, and this cabinet's close to the wood stove. We can take the wood direct from here straight to the stove. Cuts down on losing heat and letting in the cold and dealing with wood trash all over the floor coming from the door to wherever you're storing your wood at. by having a cabinet near the stove that you can fill from the outside.
Is anybody home?
If you do build a cabinet like this or modify a cabinet to produce something like this, I want to point out firewood with its moisture content, even though you've dried it for a season, it still has some moisture in it and it's heavy. So I have a box inside of the cabinet, a box inside of a box, a wooden box inside my cabinet so that I'm not destroying the cabinet. So the first version of a firewood cabinet that I made for my studio, I did not have this box on the inside of it. And what I found after a couple of years of putting firewood in, basically it was pushing the cabinet apart. So the box is built in such a way with brackets that you can put the pieces of wood in here, screw the box together, unscrew it, take it apart, take it out, whatever. So it can be replaceable, and it keeps the wood, the firewood, off of the cabinet interior itself so it doesn't push out the sides and ruin the cabinet.
If you enjoy this video, please share it with your friends.
And hit that like button and subscribe to our channel if you haven't done that already. And if you'd like to receive notifications when we upload the next video, hit that notification bell. Thank you.
See you on the next one.
Is my head in there? No. Still no? No. Well, no, it is. Yeah.
Where's my tape measure?
Boo.
And hit the like button and subscribe to our channel if you haven't done that as oh. Thank you.
See you on the next one.
Thank you.
See you on the...
She just loves cooking on this stove, you know.